Wisdom with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show. Okay, everybody, welcome to Practical Wisdom for Leaders. Thank you so much for checking in wherever you are in the world. Today, I have Paul Crick, and we are going to have a really fun conversation. It's a topic that we have not discussed on this podcast today, and I'm excited about that. I think what I would love to do, Paul, is maybe say hello, talk a little bit about yourself, and then we will jump in. So what do listeners need to know about you?
I usually start slightly humorously by saying I'm a recovering management consultant. I had the privilege of working around the world doing a management consulting role for the likes of PricewaterhouseCoopers, Capgemini, and latterly IBM, which took me to go and do some fabulous projects with some amazing clients. And as I say, I managed to do that all over the world. So that helped me develop an international perspective. So I think that's me professionally. In 2020, I got the opportunity to finally set up my own business, which I now do, which is the Elevate Partnership. And the Elevate Partnership is all about helping individuals and teams be brilliant at what they do. And I love doing that. And I guess the only other thing I would say is I'm a student of music, I'm a student of Aikido, and I'm a lifelong fan of Liverpool Football Club. So perhaps that's a good place to start.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so what are some of your favorites when it comes to music?
I don't want to turn your audience off because my natural home is progressive rock.
That's one of mine as well. Let's go. What do you got? What are some of your favorites?
I was carried into the house as a baby and put into a cot with a record player under it. So I started with Herb Alpert and the New Seekers and the King's College Choir and various artists that would lull me into sleep. So I think it just crept into my DNA. And I think the first serious album I bought with my own money was ABBA Arrival, which I absolutely love. I still love it to this day.
Yeah.
But then for some reason, I think as you grow up, you discover that certain things are cool and certain other things aren't cool.
Yes.
And there was a certain amount of peer pressure. But one of my best friends at the time, his sister was into Genesis.
Okay.
And so was he. And he played me all the Genesis albums. And that was it. I was gone and I was hooked. And then my first live gig was to see Judas Priest supported by Iron Maiden before Iron Maiden were ever known.
Wow.
And again, live, that's how old I am, Scott. Live music is very much in my blood. And then my musical taste disappeared down the progressive rock, heavy rock, and it's broadened ever since. That's me.
So progressive rock. So we're going to go Yes, Rush, Jethro Tull,
Yes.
Pink Floyd.
All the usuals, yes. I'm blessed to see Pink Floyd in 1981 do The Wall at Earl's Court.
Oh, wow.
I think I was about 17, and I think that still is a top 5 concert. So,
Paul, I'm jealous. I probably have that bootleg somewhere.
Yes, it got released. It actually got mastered into a CD over in this country, so it is actually available beyond a bootleg. And then I guess the other highlight was seeing Genesis do their final concert in Rome.
Wow.
on the 2007 tour. I know they came and did the other tour, which I also got to see. But the Rome one was spectacular. Half a million people in the Circus Maximus watching Genesis do their thing. So
Supper's ready.
Indeed. Unfortunately, they didn't do that there, but I have seen them do it in time, and yeah, all good.
Fun story. One of my favorite metal songs ever is Defenders of the Faith by Judas Priest.
Oh, marvelous.
Heavy duty into Defenders of the Faith. So I had a Judas Priest phase, and I have tickets to see Rush in 3 locations this fall.
Or 3? You're going to go see them in 3?
Yes, I'm going to see. And so I've seen them several times, but and it was hilarious. Jethro Tull released an album. It might have been 72, Thick as a Brick. And the album, it came and you would open it up and there's a newspaper in there. And Ian Anderson and crew wrote this just hilarious, just mock-up of a city and a town. And it was a newspaper. And so I actually sold that years ago. And so this fall, I went on eBay and I rebought that album because I got a record player and I just got Pink Floyd, a version of the album, the original pressing that had the posters and the postcards in it. So we could geek out on music.
We could. I think there's other things we have perhaps to attend to.
We could talk about Roger Waters and David Gilmour and leadership, or I just was at Abbey Road with my daughters, and we could talk about Paul and John and George and Ringo and kind of the leadership challenges they had.
Indeed.
But today we're talking about grace. And I have never talked about this topic on this podcast, and I'm really excited, Paul, to just understand a little bit better how you think about the concept. So take me into your world when it comes to this topic of grace.
So I think grace has been an evolution of an idea that has took the seed was planted in 2007. So I was working as a management consulting. I was in that sort of highly intense environment of 75 plus hours plus travel, working with clients that didn't always want you to be there, doing a variety of different projects, trying to help them build, trying to help them grow, trying to help them rectify some of the challenges that they were having, whether that primarily at a process level and also in a marketing sort of customer service environment. And I got back to the Hilton Hotel on Edgware Road in London, and it was a rainy night, and I picked up the Evening Standard on the way up through the lobby up to the room. I was tired, but it was more than tired. There was something not quite right. So as I walked in, threw the paper on the bed and then sat down and looked at the wall, and it's got this sort of classic flock wallpaper, which isn't necessarily my immediate taste, but it grabbed my attention. And I looked at it and I was ambushed by this question, which was simply, is this it? And the answer was, because if it is, it sucks. And I can't tell you why. And that really was the seed of it all that started it. To add to that, as I sort of flicked through the Evening Standard, waiting for the sort of standard club sandwich and beer to arrive as room service, before I got to the TV listings, there was a piece of distress advertising in the bottom left-hand corner, and it was an advert for a workshop. And it said, "Get the life you deserve. Free seminar, 2 hours, London, this location, two nights hence." And I just went, that's for me, I'm going.
Wow.
And I did. I went, and it started this whole journey of transformation that's taken me. The seminar was basically introducing the idea of new linguistic programming, which has, it's people who are pro it, people who are quite happy to shoot it down. That took me into that world. I had a lot of breakthroughs in terms of sudden moments of realization and epiphanies about things I'd learned and I'd assumed and I'd not really questioned, that took me into this space of really starting to unlearn some of the things that I'd taken on board through conditioning that I guess we all do as we move through our journey in life. And we make decisions about, what do I still want to hold on to, or how do I want to think about things differently? And I had been to several events which took me in. By now I was certified in various aspects of neurolinguistic programming. I got to be a trainer. I then decided to actually set up a business that was all about helping people using these tools. But then I got to a point where these tools, when I met certain clients with certain challenges, they didn't deliver results. What really annoyed me was some of the community, not all of the community in NLP, would say, that's your client. And I would think, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's a gap in my knowledge and my skills. I wonder what that is. And then I went down the route of energy psychology. That took me into studying psychotherapy and 7 different modalities of that, which gives you a skill set and a toolkit that allows you to see and understand yourself, because there's always me search and research.
Yes.
And to apply that and then to clear some of the fog or some of the dust in the attic to then say, oh, I see things a bit more clearly. And I guess one of the final pieces of the main part of the jigsaw came when I took up martial arts, and particularly the martial art of Aikido, because that is a martial art that is unlike others in that it's not competitive. And it's not a striking art. It's not about defeating your opponent. It's literally translates as best you can from Japanese into English into harmony, spirit, way. And the idea from a martial perspective is don't win the fight, stop the fight. From a philosophical point of view, it's how do you take the energy that's coming towards you and redirect it in a way that restores harmony. So your opponent isn't harmed, and the world around you and you aren't harmed, and everything goes back to the condition before, which becomes really interesting when you take those principles off the mat and into team situations, into company situations, and you show people certain things, because people aren't necessarily aware of somatically how they respond to when pressure can be simply something as simple as someone disagreeing with an idea in your meeting, or someone assigning you an action and that culturally you're not allowed to speak out and say, we have a proposal, we need to work this weekend, everyone's assumed, everyone's available for working, aren't you? But to say no is like a political faux pas, well, a career faux pas, when really you've got family commitments and actually you want to not lay down the law, but you want to set a boundary that says, hang on, there's a boundary between my personal life, my working life, and actually I've made personal commitments. So that creates that somatic reaction in the body. And as you dip into the world of what that looks like and how Aikido translates off the mat, then that's where grace really came from. And of course, by now I was certified as a coach, and like all good coaches, we need our own personal framework. We can stamp with authority, but I was looking for one. I wasn't looking for one. One sort of came to me. I started working on, so if I take all these tools, what would that produce as a framework? And I knew there was a somatic component, because if you look at neurophysiology, if you look at the science of somatics, then the body and the mind are interrelated in ways that science confirms.
Yep.
Our heart communicates more with our brain than our brain communicates with our heart. There's all kinds of science. Look at the science of mindfulness. So you end up with this conciliant thinking that says, if I pull these strands together and connect these dots, what I'm able to do is create a lens that's slightly different from other lenses. But in reality, it's just a different colored door to the same room. And this is my door. And if you want to come through it, these are the sorts of things I can help with. And I have a framework, and the framework is called grace. And all good frameworks, it's a mnemonic. So G is for grounding. That's the start. It's not necessarily a start point, but if you're going to introduce it, that makes sense. R is for resolve. So given all the ups and downs with goal setting theory, and some parts of it work and some parts of it don't work, and depends on the context, then resolve is an approach that sort of takes into account things like intention, holding on to goals lightly, not losing sight of them, but not gripping them so tightly that when you've either achieved the goal and that's happened, you get this sense of emptiness. That wasn't what I imagined it was going to be. Or you hold on to it so tightly that you fail. The A is for acceptance. And this is about how you meet the world. And there's a lot of where the Aikido comes in. It comes in across all of it. But acceptance is facing up to the reality of, on the mat, you'd face up to the reality that I've got my chief instructor with a knife and a sword coming at me, fully committed. And I need to figure out how I'm going to redirect that energy in a way that I don't get hurt, he doesn't get hurt, and the thing ends. So it's acceptance of self.
Yeah.
It's acceptance of other. So we're always kind to people who are like us. We're always compassionate towards people who are like us. But what about people who are different to us? What about people who hold different ideologies, have different ideas? Can you hold your arms open wide enough to be curious enough to want to listen, to want to learn, to want to do that? So acceptance of other becomes an important component of that, and particularly when we're working together in an organizational setting, in a team context. And then there's acceptance of the system. So we are part of systems.
Yep.
Systems within systems. And some of those things are givens. And a lot of the problems we have with life is because we wish it was different and we fight against it instead of looking at how can we do that. Now, it's important to say that there's a privilege element to that, because if you're stuck in a war zone, then grace doesn't really hold up, because you're talking about physical survival and those tenets that. So I think it's important to acknowledge that this is all very well-meaning and sounds great, but if you're in an acute situation where there is a threat to life, then all bets are off to a greater degree. Having sorted grounding, resolve, and acceptance out, you end up with create. And in consulting, what we used to do a lot of was we used to copy and paste, which is a form of creation. But we are often reminded that the thinking that got us here is not the thinking that's going to get us out of here to where we need to get to solve the challenges, the gnarly and knotty challenges that we can't solve individually, we can only really solve together. So that means we need to think differently. But to do that takes courage. If you're not grounded in your body, if you haven't got the alignment between mind, body, and your physiology and your spirit, for want of a better word, then it becomes difficult to create and stand up for something and say, this is what I believe in, this is what I'm stand for. Who else is with me? Who else wants to explore this? Who else wants to disagree with me so that I can shape this into a stronger, more coherent, more well-rounded proposition that stands up? And then the last piece, E, is embody it, which is how do you do something consistently? How do you fall in love with a process that says, I'm going to do something consistently every day to develop the muscle that I need to develop that helps me bring grace into being? It's a long answer to your question.
No, I love it. I love it. And I loved that phrasing, fall in love with the process. How do you embody it? It's a part of you. It's who you are, right?
It sounds simple, but it's not. Getting up consistently. So I find it amusing that in the sports world, and we love the sports world, we love learning the lessons of the sports world, and we bring people in who are epic elite athletes. And how do you do what you do? And how do you develop this winning mindset? And how do you do that? And yet it's almost, as the saying goes, people want the view from the top of the mountain, but they don't necessarily want to climb it.
Yes.
And yet the sports person has done that. So in sport, it'll be a case of train every day. So it'll be train and then compete.
Yeah.
In business, it's the opposite. It's compete. Should we have an away day? Do you think we should do some training? and then
Let's see if we can fix all of our alignment, groundedness
in 3 days.
3 hours.
And I was blessed. I got to train consultants around the world in those things. And we would do things like, we would take a topic like emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence it's what every leader needs. And you do the classic, here's a presentation on emotional intelligence, here's the flip charts, here's the slides. Okay, now you're going to break out and do an exercise, which is a role play. And you're going to video it. So everyone goes, ooh, video, that's going to make it. And then you're going to do the feedback, and that's great. And then you come back into the room for the plenary session, which is, so any questions? What was easy? And everyone's looking at the watch going, is it lunchtime yet? And then 1 or 2 questions, and then we go, right, next topic. Because the assumption is, now that we've taught emotional intelligence, then people are emotionally intelligent. And that's true to varying degrees.
Yeah.
And yet, when we all sit back and think about it, it's a lifetime practice that you will never master. You'll just get better at.
No, you'll never. As a parent of 3 teenagers, I have a simulation. It's a 24-hour 7-day a week, 365-day a year simulation that is designed to test my emotional intelligence and develop.
And I think that's true of every parent. People say, "Oh, I'm not really a good coach," and then you just say, "How many of you got kids in the room?" And you go, "No, you're fine. You're doing coaching great."
Of the elements here in Grace, are there spaces where you feel people struggle the most? What stands out for you as something that this tends to be something that has to be a daily practice? This tends to be something that doesn't come naturally. I just had a conversation this morning with a gentleman in Thailand. His name is Peter. The episode released last week for listeners, so have a listen to that. But when everything is seducing you, and I don't mean that in a sexual way, but our rate of activity in organizational life, our rate of what's coming at us 24/7, 365, 7 days a week, it's just you're on, quote unquote. And we're being seduced into that kind of system one way of being from a Kahneman standpoint, just autopilot. What do you see is the most challenging aspect of this for the leaders that you're working with? Is it even that they value this? I mean, can that be part of the challenge sometimes, that they just don't even see how this will help them get the next widget out the door, so to speak? What's your experience?
I think that's a good question. I think the good consulting answer would be it depends. The honest truth of it is when you're making change like this, that is transformative, what you're really doing is you're looking at a change of identity.
Yeah.
You're and the story that goes with that, the narrative that we tell ourselves. And I give you an example. It's a silly example in some ways, and in others it illustrates the point as well. But many years ago, I used to smoke 40 cigarettes a day. Now I look at it and go, what on earth was I thinking? But it was partly peer acceptance. It was partly a way of alleviating whatever anxieties I thought I had. And it used to be in the office where I worked that my boss would swing by with a couple of other people and say, "I'm going for a cigarette. Do you want to come with me?" So it was an opportunity to go and have a cigarette, to be in the halo of my boss at a time in my career when I was pretty immature and wanted to step up and wanted the markers of success, a job title, more money, that kind of thing. Yep. And consequently, to be in his orbit was a thing of some description.
Sure.
But there was a day when I'd given up smoking for the first time and he swung by the desk and he said, "Do you want to come for a cigarette?" And I said, "No." And he paused and it was as if I'd developed two heads. He was very gracious about it, but you could see the light go on.
Yeah.
And that's a moment when the narrative has changed to say, I am changing a behavior that means I am not quite the person I was yesterday. And the story that goes with that is different. So take a very simple example. Sometimes when I was coaching internally at IBM, I would deliberately finish coaching sessions 15 minutes early to give people 15 minutes to either digest what was discussed in the session. And occasionally someone would say, "So what do we do now?" And I said, "Why don't you go for a walk? Why don't you just go out, step outside, get some fresh air, walk around the block, and then come back in, and then whatever's next, go to whatever's next." But they couldn't do that because the narrative unconsciously was, I need to move from diary appointment to diary appointment, back to back, be busy, be visible, all that kind of thing. So it's just simply it's partly having the awareness that you're doing it. And then even if you have the awareness, it's the courage to make what is practically a small step, but actually from a narrative and identity shift is huge.
Yeah.
So I gave up alcohol 5 years ago, primarily because I knew if I did, I'd perform better on the mat doing the Aikido. And it started to become a serious thing. It was becoming, and still is, a daily practice. It was helping my mental health. It was helping my clarity. It was helping all sorts of things physically. And therefore, giving up alcohol meant I need to behave differently around it when people would say, do you want to come to the pub?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it'd be like, ooh, that's a different narrative. How do I handle that? And for some people, that can be quite difficult.
The smoking,
So,
it's similar to the smoking.
so I use those as examples because people understand it and get it. But I think there's awareness of what am I doing and what do I need to unlearn and why. There's a self-awareness thing. But then perhaps more importantly, it's this narrative identity shift that says emotionally on the inside, if you think of interoception, the feelings I have inside my body are uncomfortable and I want to project them somewhere else. And that, whereas what I really need is the support in that moment to say, you're okay, you're good, you haven't got two heads, it's great you're making this decision, come with us anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that simple scenario doesn't really exist enough, I sense. And I'm sure there's thousands of pockets of practice where it does. And if it does, fantastic.
You use some words here that really courage, awareness, identity. I think of your story of sitting in the Hilton, and there's an awareness internally in that moment of this isn't it. This isn't what I'm here to do. This isn't, or it maybe it was, but I'm not feeling it any longer. And so you have the courage to go to this course and just let's explore that and see what else is out there and begin to think about. But that identity shift, that's a process. I've been in therapy for 17 years with my doctor, Dr. Phil. He's incredible. He's not the Dr. Phil, but he's my Dr. Phil, and he's awesome. And we reflect sometimes about some of the conversations we had before my son was born, who is now 17. And it's fascinating. It really is an interesting experience to look within honestly over these different stages. But I had a moment a year and a half ago. No, it wasn't a year and a half ago. It was probably 3 years ago where I just felt differently about, I was a professor, management professor, job for life. But is this what I want? Is this how I want to spend my time anymore? But that identity shift, it took 2 years of talking with Phil, talking with mentors, talking with my wife to even start to get comfortable about the notion of, do I make a change? But it's that consistent daily commitment and that practice that I think is a part of that. And it takes courage to quit drinking when everything around us in our culture is telling you otherwise.
I think depending on how you use alcohol, whether it's to numb up or whether it's just to be social and have fun, and it's not a judgment, it's just a choice. Grace is not a behavior we manufacture in the moment. It's something that emerges as a natural consequence of the choices, discipline, and awareness that we learn to cultivate over time.
Yeah. Yeah. What else should listeners know about grace? What else comes to mind?
It's cultivated through deliberate practice. And therefore, one of the things that I try to encourage is to find the practice that works for you. So it's not about being prescriptive and saying you should do this, you should do that. And it's about what appeals. So if we take grounding, for example, there's many different ways you can ground. For some people, it's yoga. For some people, it's going for a run. For some people, it's spending time with their kids. For some people, it's being out in the garden, gardening, hiking. Whatever it is that takes you back into that state of coherence.
Love it.
When your actions and your presence and your values align, then it's that practice and it's that willingness to use it. And it's different horses for different courses. So it's not saying this is the new management thing that we need to do and everybody needs to do it and everything will be better. It's saying, here is a way, because when we know grace when we see it. Usain Bolt, Simone Biles, any elite, Yu Wang on the piano. We know it when we see it. But what belies that grace and that fluidity and that alignment and that coherence is all the things you don't see, which is the grit and the grind and the tears and the blood and the sweat and the snot of doing the daily practice, of the failure that lead you to the point where grace can emerge.
Yeah.
And to do that. So the framework is really something that gives you an input to work on as a consistent practice to then create conditions where grace may emerge, as you and I would perhaps recognize it.
But it sounds like Aikido for you was one of those
Yes.
grounding activities that began to become more of your identity and more of, it was a grounding experience, correct?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things it gives us, it's a hands-on practice. And what we live in a time when we are intentionally or otherwise more and more disconnected through our devices, through our agendas, through the way our culture views what you and I would have going out and socializing to meet people, to find a partner. That has a different hue to it today than it did when you and I were first doing that.
Yeah.
And therefore disconnection. So having a hands-on practice, well, hands-on leads us to co-regulate. And co-regulation is the thing that we learn first. If you go and look at Dr. Ed Tronick's still face experiment with the mother and the baby, the mother interacts with the baby and the baby is responding. And its two nervous systems becoming one. And they are interacting and it's pleasurable and there's a clear state of joy where there's an alignment. The nervous systems are clearly. And then the mother looks away, takes her attention away, and then just looks at the baby with a blank face. And within a split second, the baby detects that. And there's two things to it. It's one, seeing that as a fascinating process and seeing it, but it's also recognizing that it doesn't just happen when we're babies, it happens now.
Oh, yeah.
And our nervous system responds to that.
It's happening in the workplace all over the world right now.
All over the world. And that's why, for me, the opportunity to bring grace as an idea and as a practice for those that are open to it feels important enough to actually make a stand where I'm willing to change my identity and narrative and say, no, this is me, this is what I stand for, and this is what I believe, and this is what I want to bring into the world. Whereas when I left consulting, leaving that, a bit like you and your experience of the transition from academia, it's like I would introduce myself as, I'm a former management consultant, and it's kind of, now I've turned that into, I'm a recovering management consultant. Because it's
on the
funny.
airplane and someone's like, what do you do? I don't know.
I'm making it up as I go along, just like you are.
But
No, I'm not making, I'm happy.
And more, if I am not engaged in some of those grounding activities, I think for some people it's their faith or their spirituality. I think for a larger percentage of at least the Western world, in the United States, Christianity has decreased in numbers in recent years. And I think regardless of how you feel about different faiths, going somewhere on a Sunday, hearing a good message, reflecting, being in community, there's something important there. There's something very important there. And I think
if that grounds you, that's great.
That's great.
And who am I to deny or even to be arrogant enough not to open up and listen to that?
Yep.
I think for me, I've taken a secular approach simply because I want to reduce friction. I want it to be something that is used to navigate tension, power, and uncertainty, and to be concerned with a lived experience rather than a doctrine.
And I love how you say, look, whatever, it could be a hike, it could be yoga, it might be meditation. What is it that grounds you? Because if you're with a leader who is embodying what you've spoken about, they, in my imagination, are going to be more likely to be intentional, mindful. They're going to be more likely to be working from a place of that groundedness versus a pinball, just moving all over. And to your point about the nervous systems communicating, again, just visualize right now the individuals in positions of authority around the world who are not displaying grace, embodying that concept, and the impact that has on their teams.
And wider communities.
Exactly. And it's tragic. And there's a lot of individuals right now who are stuck in that space with that authority figure. And I think we share in a lot, how do we better prepare people to serve in these roles and serve in these roles in a healthy way, so that, again, when you look at some of the data on engagement numbers around the world and retention numbers around the world, there's a lot of opportunity for us. There really is. So as we begin to wind down our time, Paul, what for you is the practical wisdom in this conversation? If you were to distill it down for listeners, what are one or two things that you just want people to leave with?
I think the first would be to think about where you are in this moment. Are you grounded or not? It's not a judgment. It's not a value judgment if you're not grounded. It's okay to fall off the horse. We all fall off the horse. The question is, how quickly do you get back on it? Or can you get back on it? And there are practices, a whole range of practices that you can do to support learning how to get back on the horse more quickly. The second, I would say, is then to have the courage to develop however small a practice, even if it's only for 60 seconds, to say, I'm going to do this one thing that I know is going to be slightly different and make me different going forwards today than as a person moving through life, moving through uncertainty in a way that is permanently different to the way I used to do it yesterday.
Yeah.
And the third thing would be, if you find that difficult, then find your support, whatever that is, and whoever that is.
Yeah.
To help you through that.
Yep. And like I said, that's been one of my greatest gifts, is having mentors, Phil, my wife, others who help me in that space. Because all of us need that support system, whether it's a coach, but an individual to help us live into that, embody that.
And you don't need a ton of people. You just need to find my wife for me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
To borrow a quote, she loved me back to life. My dojo gave me discipline and gave me, I belong at home, obviously, but it gave me somewhere to belong.
Yeah. Yep.
And when we have those two things, and I know from past episodes of the podcast, the idea of mattering, the idea of belonging and being seen and heard are so powerful, really powerful. And my encouragement would be, go find that, whatever that is for you.
Paul, so good to meet you, sir. And you know what? I really appreciate the conversation. A small part of me wishes we could have just geeked out about music the whole time. Maybe another time we'll do that.
That would be fun.
But there also is some of what you just discussed shines through in people's music as well. Like, I loved how you were speaking about some of the individuals you named a little bit ago, because when we're in that space, it transmits, right? It transmits as a parent, it transmits as a leader, it transmits as an artist, and it transmits and it's felt in others. And I appreciate the conversation, sir. I appreciate the work that you do. Have a great evening, and thank you. We'll do it again.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Be well. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.